Hey everyone, I have a bit of a cold, but I wanted to go ahead and make a video before things change a lot. So I spent the last few weeks working on a particle system, and I'll show you kind of how those were created. I recorded a few video clips on the way, but I wanted to show it to you, and this is the final result for now, because I want to work on something else. I was hoping to only spend maybe a week on this, and we're on the 4th week now, so I'm very ready to move on. But now, when you shoot ships, you can see that there's a shield effect. And when you shoot them enough, you'll blow them up. And so, those are the particles. And the entire system is built on what is called instance rendering. And what that means is that if I were to have a lot of effects going on, they're all a single draw call. And a draw call is kind of like what you ask the graphics card to do. And so right now all of these ships are actually individual draw calls, and hopefully I'll instance them at some point. But at a certain point, it becomes the bottleneck to issue a bunch of draw commands, and so batching them together or like instancing them improves performance. And so I have this little test that can randomly spawn explosions around, and this is in order to test the effect of instancing. And we can crank these numbers really high and see that a lot of particles can be rendered at once without losing much frame rate. And now I'm losing some frame rate, and I'm attributing that to doing work on the CPU side. So for every particle that exists, there's an update. And so you can imagine each one of these being ticked. And there's probably at least 2 matrix multiplies going on the CPU side, which potentially could be on the GPU side. But I think that is what is dropping the frame rate actually, and not the rendering of the particles themselves. And so there's an issue right now, and I want to fix it later, where the UI is rendering actually before the particle system, and that's just an order thing I need to figure out an appropriate system for. So, and so the way this works is if I freeze time. Let's shoot this one. So there is a texture that has a tessellated like pattern to it, and I can show you that from renderdoc. If I pull that on the screen. So this is a very handy graphics debugging tool if you don't know about it. Renderdoc. Let's see, right here, renderdoc. So like the doctor for your renderer. And this texture here in the corner, this little tessellated pattern is what I use to create the explosion effect and the shield effect actually. And I just made that in GIMP with some gradients. There's like a gradient tool where you can fill in polygons and you get that cool black to white that fills in shapes. So what this does, if I explode this, so as it grows, it is sweeping kind of from 0 to 1 over time, and there's some in the shaders there are kind of some factors that stretch that out or manipulate that, but you can just think about it as going from 0 to 1, and as colors in that texture, so like the black has almost no color. After it hits a certain threshold, that black gets colored out, and it starts coloring out along from black to white. And that happens over time, and as you can see, the particle is starting to disappear. And so that's really how it works, and it does not require any alpha blending if you're familiar with that. It is discarding the fragments or the pixels if they fall within under that threshold. So there's no ordering required. You can render these instances in any order. There's no transparency issues. Now I had a bug, which is why this took so long, that took me nearly 2 weeks to figure out. In addition to working on other features like making the effects look nice. But in release mode, I would occasionally I would occasionally not see particles of render at all, and I attributed it to being an issue with instancing, because instancing requires that you pack data efficiently so you can pass it all at once to the graphics card, and I thought maybe I was having an issue with that. But it turns out that my swap buffer was actually happening indeterministically, in the order at least. So my particle, I would swap my buffer to the monitor, and then I would render my particles and then clear. And I unfortunately I did not discover this from renderdoc, but I have a capture that helped me find it. I have a capture of the issue, and then we can see what happened there. So normally the particles are rendered last. We render everything, all these ships, and there's a lot of ships being rendered. And occasionally I would see nothing here at the end for particles, and I was wondering, why can't I see a draw call for my instance particles? When I would capture it and they were working, I would see the draw call right here at the end. And so I ended up adding a lot of print breakpoints within my program to kind of get an idea of the state that the engine was moving in. And so by print breakpoint, I just mean like adding a breakpoint and setting its actions, and it would print something out and tell me what function is happening. And then as it executes down here, you would get updates. And it makes it really slow, but that was how I figured it out. So what was happening was my window was swapping the buffer to the monitor, and then I was trying to render particles. And if we look here, here's the swap buffers. This is the end of what renderdoc shows. If I go all the way back up to the top, the frame start, we see that there's my particles. They're being rendered, and then we immediately clear the color and start rendering. And so normally this clear color and swap I wanted to be paired, but it wasn't as organized. Anyways, that was an extremely frustrating bug to figure out, but renderdoc helped. And if you're learning OpenGL, I would highly recommend learning this earlier than later.